I think casual Commander players lost the plot again, and it's regarding card ownership, specifically when it comes to owning multiple copies of a card, which is very much commonplace in constructed formats where you need up to 4 copies of a single card. But especially when it comes to swapping in between decks, I doubt people are buying 8 copies of Wooded Foothills. They want to just buy 4 and they'll probably transfer between the decks. To be fair, that's a lot easier to justify because in one night of maybe something like Modern, you're probably not playing multiple decks. You're just playing one. So you spend some time beforehand to re-sleeve up a singular deck and that's what you run. But at a Commander night at the LGS, you might be playing multiple decks. So it might be harder to swap between. So there are a couple of solutions, especially if you own a copy of a card. You might choose to represent a token that you don't have with like an affinity token, or you might choose to make up a shorthand little proxy for an expensive card that you already own. But for some players, that's a problem. And that's what I wanted to discuss today. This Reddit post talking about is someone being unreasonable based on buying multiple cards or having their play group make them purchase those cards. I'm going to break it all down here and really try and settle the whole proxy debate at this angle. Well, 15 hours ago, this person says, am I being unreasonable here? The playgroup doesn't allow proxies of cards even if you own them. Yo, folks, late stage capitalism has got y'all messed up. Like y'all actually can't think beyond your regular programming. That's insane. I bought a second copy of Adeline for another deck. Friend said I wouldn't have done that. I'd have just swapped it between decks, as I just mentioned, because you own the damn, you only need 1 copy. You only need 1 copy for Commander. Heck, even for Constructed, you only need up to 4. Just swap them in between. Ain't no way, like for example, if you had multiple like decks that required 1 singular fetch land, are you buying multiple copies of that fetch land? You're insane if you think that's logical, right? What's the meaningful difference here between running a proxy if I already own the card and spending more time swapping? I do own 1 between decks and making sure I always bring both decks so I don't accidentally bring an unplayable deck. Okay, yeah, so even that part of it is great too, right? Like if you needed to prove that you own the card, I don't get it. Now, before I really highlight my point here, right? So shout out to Adeline here. This card is actually like pretty sweet, right? It's really cool. When it attacks, it has a star power, so it has power equal to the amount of creatures you control. When it attacks for each opponent, you create a 1/1 human creature token onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. So it counts itself and its creature count. So in a 4-player game, this is at base with no creatures out that you control, a 4/4 when it attacks. And so obviously you're playing like token strategies, go wide and you're building it big. And so with something like that, it's really good at what it does. And so if I go in face-to-face games right now, the card honestly demands a relatively high price. I mean, right now we're looking at like Black Friday deals and everything. So I mean, the cheapest I'm getting this card in Canadian is like $9.74. Maybe if I can get like yeah, I guess maybe if this was on sale, the near mint was on sale, if there were played copies, people probably bought them out and everything. Can go as expensive as $22 if I wanted to, kind of bling it out and everything. So it can actually be relatively expensive. I wonder how much this full is. Probably cheaper, yeah, because of maybe curling problem. But regardless, it actually demands a fair price, right? So a lot of people might argue if it's like a cheap card, maybe you should buy more copies. I still think that's kind of garbage, but like a lot of times if it's a common, there are multiple copies of that card. So a lot of times like the card's like 25 cents, you might just buy multiple copies of it, right? Maybe it's like a common tap land or something, a common duel. That happens very much so often with like something like Volatile Fjord, which I'm holding up right now, which you'll notice is actually a proxy, which I'll run into in a second here, but just highlighting the fact that this card specifically can demand a bit of a price. Buying multiple copies isn't necessarily that reasonable. So are they being unreasonable? And I just want to highlight this with this point specifically. So first and foremost, here's my copy of the One Ring. I managed to get it out of one of those promo boxes. It's the one copy that I have because I figured, yes, it's going to get banned in Modern. We're almost approaching December here. That card's disappearing, so I don't want to invest into it anymore. Here's my other copy of the One Ring. You'll notice it's a proxy. If I pull it out, it's a paper cutout version underneath Harmonize. That's how much I hate Harmonize. I would rather this not be a basic and remind me what I'm playing this in the slot of. This is like kind of one of my draw slots. It's how I like to proxy things. I get it. It could just be any card, but again, it's a proxy. Then y'all are gonna hate me for this. I don't want to see y'all hitting the dislike button off this one, but this is my other copy of the One Ring. So that is me being lazy. Here are my 3 different copies of the One Ring, 3 very different proxies of the One Ring itself, right? And so when it comes to something like this, I already own 1 copy of the card. The card at some point, the One Ring was demanding $100 price tag. And so no, I wasn't gonna buy multiple copies of the card because I could just as easily switch the card between multiple decks. If anything, like, this is Schrodinger's ring, because it could be in one deck, it could be in another, it could not be here, but it's there. Schrodinger's ring is there. The One Ring exists because I own it, right? It's probably a bad example because when it comes to Schrodinger, it's either there or not, but y'all get my point here. Well, here's something else. Look, here's my real copy of Ristic Study, still in like its original sleeve that has like the N on it, right? Like from face-to-face games, right? Here's my actual copy of Ristic Study. Here's my proxy of Ristic Study. You see the white, the cutout I got lazy with? What did I even put in the back here? It's backed by planes. This is my copy of the One Ring because I own a copy of the One Ring. The Volatile Fjord, you know why I have this in proxy? Because at the time that I was upgrading my Is It Commander deck, face-to-face games did not have copies of Volatile Fjord. And I didn't want to buy it because, look, I had credit at the time at face-to-face games. And so I wanted to use that credit. I didn't want to spend more money if I didn't need to. I just want to work on a budget too, right? So I proxy this and I was like, whatever, right? Like everyone's like, oh, this is a common, you could buy this at any point. It's a cheap card. For someone like me who makes content, has the resources, yeah, I can buy this card at any point. Maybe people don't have access to something like this, but regardless, if you own, let's just get this side of the argument out. If you own a singular copy of that card, you go play with it, right? So I am very open when it comes to my Commander games that I play with other people. I'm okay with you proxying cards as long as you let me know, like, what is the type of game that we're playing and why are you proxying? Like, are you proxying because you're playing like a CDH deck? Fantastic. Let me pull out my CDH deck, whether it's proxied or not. That's great. Then we can align because I'm just here to play the game. You can proxy whatever you want. I'm happy because maybe you're testing out a new CDH deck or something competitive, or maybe you're telling me like, hey, I proxy these cards. I don't really know if this is the direction I want to take my Commander deck. I'm just testing it out. That's perfectly fine. Let's play the game. That's so cool. Let me see what you got going on, right? 100% let me know. Honestly, almost any reason you give me, I'm pretty chill with you proxying. But for the people that somehow, you know, late stage capitalism got to their head and they need people to own things, right? Because we're not out here for our fellow, you know, humans out here, whatever. You know, they want to see ownership of the card. All right, this card's in this deck. This card's in this deck. I don't have it here. I wrote it down, or you know what? I printed out a copy of the card, or I got so lazy that I own the card like this. I got so lazy that I just did this. What is wrong with that? What's wrong with that, right? What is fundamentally wrong with me owning the card at base level? It's in my one deck. I like to keep maybe my blinged cards all out in one deck and then the rest of them have proxies. What is wrong with that? I can prove ownership, because when it comes to constructed players, they don't care, because obviously in sanctioned environments, you need to be able to prove that you have the card. Wizards of the Coast needs you to buy cards for their game and their IP and their product to succeed. I get that. That's perfectly fine. That's perfectly cool. But when it comes to ownership and transferring between cards and decks, I have it here. Why do I need to bring it to another deck? Heck, even if we played before, I've proven to you that I have the card. Why do I need to physically represent it between these two decks? Let me know in the comment section down below, specifically regarding the proxy debate here. Am I being ridiculous? And like literally what the Reddit post said, am I being unreasonable? I own a copy of the card. I actually own an equivalent amount to what I need. It's not like a situation where I need 4 copies of this card and I own 3. That's, I guess, an argument like for constructed play especially, but that's not an argument for EDH, right? Maybe it's something like with like the Heir Apparent, the more recent version of a card that you can own multiple copies of. Even that's perfectly fine to me, because at some point, like, I don't know, you own 25 copies. Oh, I'm trying to test like 27, 2 more. I proxy 2 more. Okay, what's wrong with that? Because yes, something like that makes sense, because especially beyond the levels of testing, you've already, you know, shown me that, yeah, I own a certain amount of copies. I'm deep into this deck, but I'm trying to like test numbers. I already own copies of this, but is my deck even better with 26, 27 copies, more copies, less copies? That's pretty reasonable to me too, because you only own some amount of the cards that you can have any number of copies of. Why not just try less or more? Right? Like that's perfectly fine for me. I think this person's playgroup is being extremely unreasonable. I would call them out, and I would honestly, like, this is unreasonable behavior. I would talk to the local game store and like if they're playing at the LGS. If it's a kitchen table, that's obviously harder because these are like personal dynamics. But if it's like a local game store, like who's enforcing that? No, like play or get out of the store. Like what kind of crappy behavior is that? It's extremely anti-business, anti-friendly, because like, look, at the end of the day, we've had so many things about how commander players, you know, may not be supporting the LGSs. LGS is dying because it's just commander players. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm saying it's anti-business because people are pushed away from playing in play groups like this. People are pushed away by people that enforce these really crappy rules that don't make any sense and are just, at the end of the day, just gatekeeping for no reason. Why would you play with players like this? Why do you want to play with players like this? Right? Like, why do I need to own multiple copies of one card, right? Like if I have a commander that's like 2 colors and it's really good in a 5-color deck, do you want me to rebuy that commander? No, I'm not doing that. And if I sit down, you tell me that, I'm calling you out on that. Why would I do that? Right? I'm not doing that. I'm making a fuss about it because what are you saying? Like legitimately, if you believe this, give me a comment like in the comment section down below, give me a legitimate reason. Try and construct a legitimate reason as to why you think this would be a real argument. I own a copy of the card. That's all I need, right? I could spend 2 seconds putting it into this deck and then all of a sudden you're okay. Again, Schrodinger's ring. Like, yo, honestly, this video needs to be called Schrodinger's ring. Someone comment Schrodinger's ring. I'm gonna pin it to the top and y'all can like it. Schrodinger's ring, because it's there or it's not. And all of a sudden y'all are mad, right? This person is not being unreasonable. Their playgroup is being unreasonable. So let's go through some of the comments. First person just like highlights it like really well here. So they're like, running a proxy when you own a copy of the card is the original usage of proxies and has been acceptable by most players for a long time. Exactly, right? Like testing it out in different varieties, right? Like, so this is beyond the argument of how I feel, where I'm like, yeah, you can proxy anything in a non-competitive environment, right? If it's competitive, you need to own the card. That is the sanctioned rules of Wizards of the Coast. We're just enforcing the rules, right? Like whatever. This is the acceptable use of proxies. You already own the copies of the card. There's no different, but in a competitive environment, I would obviously say don't proxy at like super high comp REL, because obviously the cards have like different thicknesses and like you might be able to like kind of shuffle to it. Like that's a whole different kind of minute argument. Like in a non-competitive environment of Commander, stuff like that doesn't really matter. Right? Like it doesn't really matter at all. Like thicknesses of sleeves and all that stuff. Like don't worry about all that. There's no difference between swapping a card between decks and having a deck with a real card and having decks with proxies of the card if they look like the original card. Just do it and don't tell. Like, it doesn't even need to look like the real card. Like, yo, like, look at this. You can tell this is a proxy. You see how the fjord is bent at the top? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Forget the fjord. What about the One Ring? You can see how I didn't cut it on the edge properly. This is a problem to you? Like, I feel like the argument of immersion break has gotten so thick into people's skulls that they can't think beyond why they think that. I think too many people these days have opinions without actually being able to back them up with a legitimate reason, and they get mad when people call them out. You should be able to call people out for crappy behavior. You should be able to. That is a real thing. You should be able to call out your friends, your family, your partner. You should be able to call yourself out for crappy behavior and weird opinions. It doesn't make any sense. Like, why is it that immersion breaking to you that I didn't cut my card out properly? Now, I will say one thing before we continue down this post. My personal gripe with proxies, here's my one personal gripe with proxies, right? And it's a small ask. Outside of something like a dry erase token, like an infinite token or whatever, that stuff, I get it. A lot of people have their, their own art style, or they may not be able to draw like that. That's like a personal thing. But like, even when it comes to something like this kind of breaks this rule where I say at least make a proxy that's legible or that clearly relates to a card that maybe a lot of people understand. Like if you just make a card like this and it says the One Ring, I think the vast majority of players would understand that. But if you name some like obtruse card that only works in your commander and you just write the name of it, I don't like that, because I want to be able to at least know what the card does. Like, do you have a reference for this? Like, can you spell it out for me? Like, I want to be able to look it up. Like, it's really annoying when you don't have the basics. Like, I want the mana cost in there. like the name of the card and like power toughness, if it's an enchantment or if it's an artifact. Like I want to know if I can destroy, like I want to know the basics, right? It doesn't need to be perfect, but I need basic information, because a lot of times when commander boards get really gummed up, it can be tough to kind of discern, like, oh, you know, for something like that new board wipe that kind of makes each player sacrifice 13 creatures. If you have a proxy of a card and I can't tell it's a creature, that's really annoying, because it matters to the count of that card, right? To make it cost below a certain threshold, or like Blasphemous Act or something like that. That's what I ask with proxies, right? Like, again, make it a ubiquitous card like Rhystic Study or Mystic Remora or Force of Will, Counterspell, whatever, like a card that universally everyone can understand. Or if it's something like a little less common, provide the basics of the card in the proxy. Like do your due diligence, or like explain, or don't be upset when I ask you what that card does for the millionth time, because there's so much to track in an average commander game. If you're not going to do the due diligence of like properly highlighting to me what the card does, then I'm going to keep asking, right? I'll do my due diligence. I get it. Maybe you're in a rush of time or whatever. I will do my due diligence of asking. Don't get mad at me. So that's my one ask with proxies. Write out the basics, make it kind of legible. Other than that, like, I'm cool with you playing it. Just put in the effort to actually proxy it right. So anyway, there's no difference between swapping. Just do it and don't tell them. Yo, okay. I don't know about do it and don't tell them, right? Like just call people out on this. Why do you need to hide this, right? This is just letting crappy behavior. Like, what do you mean do it and don't tell them? You need to tell them. The response below that is actually really good too here. Like, they say, I'm a member of 2 different regular play groups, and this is what both groups do. Both members have a handful of proxies in each deck, and for some cards they own that lives in another deck. Card swapping is just tedious nonsense. It really is, especially if you have cards that are like double sleeved, right? Like double sleeving is a legitimate thing, right? Especially when it comes to like packing in like foils and stuff. You need to be able to double sleeve them into hards, get some good sleeves, and then you pack them into a deck box, and then they flatten out. Yo, it's like a legitimate thing. For my own decks though, I prefer not to use proxies. When I build decks, I set a target budget. If certain cards are over budget, I don't run over the cards. This has a positive effect. Okay, like I have 5 blue decks, but I only have 2 Rhystic Studies, so 3 decks don't run it. Wait, why though? This is dumb. This is okay. Folks, we don't need to be purposefully limiting ourselves. Why do you have 2 Rhystic Studies? Again, like I'm just trying to free y'all, okay? You're entitled to do what you want, right? But when it like withholds the ability of someone else to positively impact their own lives, right? That's when it becomes a problem, right? Like, you don't need to own 2 Rhystic Studies. Sell one. Just sell one, right? This is capitalism at its highest peak. Just own what you need, right? Like 2 Rhystics, and I'm saying own what you need as someone who's got bear trinkets behind me. The irony isn't lost behind me, okay? It's not lost. 3 decks don't run it, but you can though. You can. Like, the way you're mentioning doesn't exclude, like, it doesn't talk about the fact that maybe you have restrictions per those decks. Like, you don't want Rhystic Study because it's not meeting the theme. But if you can play Rhystic Study and you should play Rhystic Study, maybe you should I don't know. Like, target budgets, I guess, is enough of a reason, but like, I don't know about that one. Like, there isn't one. Your play group is dumb and full of gatekeeping tools. Yes, this is the take. This should be the take. This is it right here. Absolutely no upvote. This gets an upvote. This gets an upvote. This gets an upvote. 100%, right? Yep, there's no reason to act this way. This gets an upvote. I draw proxies of cards I own in blank tokens. Yeah, shout out to Infinite Tokens. Not an ad, but shout out to them. I don't have my Infinity Tokens. They're in a bag behind me somewhere, but show them. But even when I sometimes get teased by my own play group for buying my own original cards in the first place, it's all good and fun, though. I acknowledge I'm playing into the capitalist machine. That's great. That's great, right? That's a great situation. My only reason for not proxying cards I don't own is that I like opening packs and doing pre-releases. Also, if I start proxying anything, it would be a slippery slope for me. I feel like I'd eventually start proxying dual lands and OP cards. But like, why? That's not a problem though. Like, what's actually, like, why do people feel icky about this, right? Like, this is not a competitive environment. This is not competitive. There's no sanctioned rules against proxying this. It's just gatekeeping tools. Nothing is stopping you from proxying Vampiric Tutor other than losers. Losers, right? Proxy the duels, proxy the Vampiric Tutor. You need to have your own deck building constrictions. Like, I feel like this is net positive, because if you make a legitimate choice not to proxy in duels, not to proxy in Vampiric Tutor, that teaches you good deck building, because then you're building to a certain power level, right? I have decks like my Scarecrow deck. Where is it? My my goddamn like my goddamn Reaper King deck. That is purposely a low power deck because this deck can get super silly. It's just shapeshifter shenanigans, right? Like that's all it is. And so I have a copy of the One Ring in here. I have a copy of like what's that giant tree? It's like 7 in green. Someone in the comment section is gonna let me know. I have a copy of that in there. But like, I don't have any tutors. I don't have anything else of any value in that deck. It's just, I'm playing it in there for the sake of it. I could take out the One Ring and play Harmonize and then it just becomes even worse, right? Like I'm adding those cards so it peaks up by a certain power and like, that's it. Like it stops at like a 6, right? Like it's got the One Ring and it's got like, you know, that card, or like the other green ramp card or whatever. But like, that's it. The rest of the deck is like doo-doo caca, right? Make good deck building decision. This is a slippery slope because you can't control yourself. You just need to admit your own problems. You can fight them. But step 1 is admitting it. Step 2 is working against it. Come on, folks. We can do better with ourselves. Seems silly to me. If I had a friend group, especially who even cares? Isn't the point of having fun with friends? Hey, yo, go to this and upvote. Yo, we actually have intelligent people on Reddit. Who knew? Who knew Reddit actually had intelligent people? As long as you're not proxying problem cards, okay, see, this is what I mean. What do you mean proxying problem cards? Just, folks, you can control your own gameplay. Like someone can clearly communicate, hey, I'm playing a prison stacks deck. Okay, everyone else is gonna play in accordance to that. Yo, maybe save your artifact hate for them. Maybe save your counter spells for them, right? Like, and then maybe let some things through, but not too much because then the rest of the group is gonna be able to do whatever they want, right? We gotta have everything for everybody. Like, it's just about self-control. Build to a certain power level. People need to do better at building their deck. Shout out to 33 Elk. Shout out to Salubrious Snail. Shout out to, oh my lord, I'm forgetting the name of them. I literally did a react video to that. The YouTuber that's also in a podcast with Salubrious Snail and 33 Elk. They have the goggles as their username. Yo, I'm so sorry if I'm forgetting your name, but shout out to all these people like Deckmaster MTG. I did a react to them about a month ago. Like shout out to these people for being some of the forefront YouTube creators out there in Commander, teaching people how to deck build properly. Go watch these channels. You can build your decks properly, and then proxying problem cards isn't a problem because you're building to a certain power level. It's not a slippery slope. You can control yourself, right? You can control yourself. There's decisions that you can make to purposely lower power your decks, and it's not, I'm not going to print proxies because that's a slippery slope. Have some self-control, folks. Come on. Just, I get it. Look, I guess it's working for you. It doesn't need to be that. Anyway, look, this is where I ultimately land on this side of the proxy debate. If you own the card, it's absolutely loser behavior for you to stop other people from playing with that card in a proxy, especially if they own the relevant amount of copies for it. It's absolutely dumb behavior. And also, just build decks to the appropriate power level. Like watch these other content creators, like watch these other channels. Like if you're on Reddit and you're saying you have these problems, like I can't say this to the casual player. The average EDH player is not watching content in droves. They might be watching like the Command Zone and stuff like that, but they're not watching like deck building guys. They're not posting on EDH Rec. Like you are a more enfranchised player. And if you're posting on Reddit, I would argue you're a more enfranchised player as well, being a commenter. And so you have that within you, to that wherewithal, that self-reflection to be able to build decks better. Go on, watch some content, engage with this stuff, and just be a better EDH player. Be more open, allow people into these spaces, and just be that welcoming force that maybe you were looking for early on in your Magic career. Maybe you didn't get that. Like, be that force that brings people in, even if people are coming through Universes Beyond product. Like, now more than ever, do we need people to be open and inviting and be welcoming in this game, because there's a lot of toxicity running around, a lot of complaining around it. And again, the irony isn't lost behind me. A lot of times I do my complaining, but I like to throw in these positive messages as well. A lot of you know, a lot of people in the comment section tell me all I do is complain. That's not true. A lot of you more enfranchised watchers, like, no, I don't complain. Like, y'all watch my videos. Have to, like 90% of the time, I'm trying to tout a positive message, whether it's play EDH in a more friendly way, like build better decks, like play more Pauper, play more. Y'all watching my shorts, like I'm trying to promote more Cube and Limited. Like I try and throw this type of stuff in. I'm not trying to complain. I'm trying to help y'all play better Magic, have better games, and just enjoy the game more, right? Let's be more open with each other. Let's just, if we're meeting the base requirements of like what Wizards of the Coast needs it to do, why are you policing it even more? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Am I being unreasonable? Am I being dumb? Who knows? Let's just play better games of EDH.